Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be talking about our content for Module 4, which is focused on word analysis part 1. Module 5 will focus on part 2. And basically what I've done is taken chapter 4 from our text on word analysis and cut it right in half. So the first half we're going to look at here in Module 4, and we're going to go a lot deeper into this content than we did in the text for this week. So we're going to focus here on phonological and phonemic awareness and phonics. So to start, what is word analysis? The focus of the next 2 weeks of study for us. It's the ability to start with the concept of the whole word and then examine the graphophonemic, so the written and the spoken or the heard parts of the word, and the morphemic parts that make up the word. Those are the bits that change, like adding a prefix or a suffix to the beginning or end. And finally, applying this knowledge when you're reading and writing the word to understand and communicate the meaning of that word. So there's a lot that's built into word analysis, which is why we're going to slow it down and spend a couple weeks on this. And just so you know, this content that we're exploring this week and next week, this is the focus of kindergarten, first grade, even into second grade. This is the focus of your English language arts block, but this process starts long before children ever enter school. And we're talking here about both oral and written as we move closer to phonics. So we're going to start here with phonological and phonemic awareness. Some key terms to get us going here. Phonological awareness. This is the ability to recognize that speech is made up of sentences or phrases that can be divided into words, and that words can be broken down into sounds, and these are called phonemes. This definition is coming from our text right on page 117. In this are things like syllables, onsets, rhymes, alliteration, all those different ways that we hear sounds when we're speaking, or when we're listening, rather. You also need to know what a phoneme is, and we're going to focus a lot on that here. Phonemes are the smallest unit of sound in the spoken language. There's about 44 of them, depending on the dialect and the accent in the English language. And then below that, and this is sort of an umbrella of terms, so we start with phonological awareness at the top and we move down. And phonemic awareness is the ability to hear those smallest units of sound, to hear all of those phonemes in words, and to be able to manipulate them. And that is the highest level of phonological awareness. If you have phonemic awareness, you've mastered most of phonological awareness. A key way to help you remember phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, these are skills that are all about sounds. Think phone call, you've got a sound. Not written text. We are not talking about letters. We are not talking about print. We are not talking about reading. These are pre-reading skills. And one way to think about it is that phonemic awareness can be taught in the dark. In order to teach a student phonological or phonemic awareness, you just need their ears. You don't need their eyes. You don't need anything written. You don't need utensils. You just need to talk, because their job is to listen. One big warning that I give all of my teacher candidates, and I will be listening for this, and as we move through the course and you start developing some instruction and some plans for your focus student, I'm going to be listening carefully that you are not adding what is called a schwa sound. So the next part of this module will be talking about the pronunciation of letter sounds. And if you add what's called a schwa, and this is the symbol for schwa, it's simply an sound. I said a schwa as I was defining a schwa. It's an sound, like you hear in the word America. We know the two letter sounds for A that we teach students are a, like in cat, and a, like in long vowel A. The word America doesn't use either one of those for its initial and final sounds. America. It's sort of like a lazy A. We don't say America. and we don't say America, we say America. That's a schwa sound. It's fine in the word America, but it's not fine when you are teaching letter sounds. So sometimes you'll hear people pronounce letter sounds like this: ma, la, ga, ta. Those are not being pronounced correctly because they have an added sound. Rather, especially hard with consonants, you've got to work really hard to clip them and not add that vocalized vowel schwa sound to the end. So for example, the letter D is not pronounced duh. When you're teaching it to children, the letter D says duh. No, it doesn't. The letter D says d, d. Very little bit of voicing. My mouth is not opening at all when I pronounce that D sound. It is d. So same thing with the following. You just heard me mispronounce them as ma, la, ga, and ta. So give it a try. How would you pronounce those? The M sound is Your mouth never actually comes open. It's a stretched consonant sound. It's called a continuant when you're able to stretch it eternally, as long as you can hold your breath. The next one is the letter L, and it's not pronounced la, la, la. It's pronounced oh, oh. The next one is G. It's not g, g. It's g, g, g. It should never really leave the back of your throat when you're pronouncing it. And G is a tricky one because we never say the G isolated by itself. It's always attached to the next sound, the next phoneme, which is typically going to be a vowel sound. So we would never just say G on its own. It's very hard to do it without the schwa. It would always have like going or gain. It would always have that next sound, which allows you to bounce right into that and avoid the schwa. But when you're isolating the G sound, it's got to be more like G, G. The next one is T, and it's not ta, ta, ta. That's going into the next sound. That's not there. It's t, t, and T is unvoiced. The box just is a reminder. It says it's easier to add an accidental schwa sound to letters that are called stop sounds or phonemes that are called stop sounds. And you could hear, like in G. G is a stop sound, g, g. You want to add that schwa. You kind of have to add that schwa in order to say it. Same thing with sounds like B. The B sound is not ba, ba. It is b, b. It's very short, very clipped. As little of that vowel sound as you can produce is what you should produce. B, b. And then same thing with the sound for K. That hard C or K sound is k, k, k. There's actually no voice at all in that one. K. And that's easier to add the schwa sound to than it is for continuants, those stretchy ones like and S. What would S say? Does it say s, s, s? No, it does not. It says s. That one is stretchy, a continuant. I'm actually going to play this video. This is coming out of the Roland Center, and this wonderfully brilliant teacher is going to share with us how to pronounce all 44 phonemes in American English. So let's see how she does it. And please follow along and practice. I will be quizzing you on this in class. Oops. Everybody's nervous about the quiz. Don't be nervous.
Hi, I'm Yvette, a facilitator at the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. You probably already know the English language has very distinct sounds, or phonemes, that we combine in different ways to make words. In this video, we are going to demonstrate how to pronounce each of the individual phonemes. Often, we accidentally add an extra or schwa sound to the end of consonants. If students hear this and imitate it, it may then be reflected in later reading and writing tasks. To prevent this, it is important to produce only the phoneme itself without any additional sounds. An example of this is the sound p. Sometimes, when teachers are trying to emphasize or isolate a phoneme, they say p. Instead, focus on producing just the phoneme itself. P. We'll start with the consonant phonemes. You'll see the associated letter or letter combination, also known as a grapheme, on the screen as I say the sound. Ready? Here we go. B as in banana. D as in dinosaur. F as in fish. G as in guitar. H as in hand. J as in jelly. K as in car. U as in leaf. M as in Monday. N as in nail. Ng as in the end of the word sing. P as in pumpkin. R as in rain. S as in sun. Z as in the middle of treasure. T as in turtle. V as in volcano. W as in watch. Y as in yo-yo. Z as in zip. Some graphemes, such as Q and X, are composed of two phonemes. For example, Q makes the Q sound, and X makes the X sound. The next phonemes are considered to be digraphs, where two letters make one sound. Ch as in child. Sh as in shoes. Th as in the middle of mother. Th as in third. Make sure students hear you pronounce phonemes correctly. You're modeling the language that they need to independently decode and write words. Just like the consonants, the English language has a wide variety of vowel phonemes with their own distinct sounds. I'll model each sound, and the grapheme will be shown on the screen below. A as in the first sound in apple. E as in the first sound in elephant. I as in the first sound in igloo. A as in the first sound in octopus. As in the first sound in umbrella. A as in the middle sound in rain. A as in the final sound in saw. E as in the final sound in tree. I as in the middle sound in light. O as in the middle sound in boat. U as in the first sound in uniform. U as in the middle sound in mood. As in the middle sound in book. Ow as in the final sound in cow. Oi as in the final sound in boy. There are also R-controlled vowels, such as R, as in the final sound in car. As in the middle sounds in herd, bird, and surf. Air, as in the final sound in chair. Ear, as in the final sound in spear. Or, as in the middle sound in fork. Sometimes, when a vowel sound is located in the unstressed syllable of a word, it becomes a schwa. An example of this is the that you hear as in the first sound of the word again. Make sure that your students hear you model the correct consonant and vowel phonemes. This will help them produce the correct sounds themselves, and in turn, guide them as they learn to read and write.
Okay, so she does a really nice job of pronouncing all of those phoneme sounds correctly and accurately. And she also reviewed all of them, all 44 that we have in the English language. I'm going to go really quickly. I'm not going to read all of these slides, but these are here as a reference for you. It's helpful to understand physiologically, biologically, what's happening in your mouth when you're producing sounds. This can be very helpful if you have children who are still developing some of the um, sound pronunciations that we have. And um, these are all the different areas of your mouth and your teeth and your lips that are coming into play as you're producing sounds, all the way down to your vocal cords. So your nasal cavity, we've got nasal sounds, the tip of your tongue. We've got sounds that require that, your lips, the front of your teeth, the tooth ridge, your soft palate way back in the back of your throat, your hard palate on the top of the roof of your mouth, the back of your tongue. All of these things have to be well developed if you are going to pronounce all of the sounds appropriately. And for very young children, that soft palate, hard palate is kind of the last thing to develop. So those sounds can sometimes be tricky if you still have an underdeveloped palate, for example. So we've got lip sounds, we've got tongue and front of the teeth sound, both voiced like TH in the, that one is voiced, and unvoiced like TH in three, that one's unvoiced. You've got the front of the tongue and the tooth ridge sounds like t, d, ch, and j, etc. Did you catch that zh like in treasure? That's one of our phonemes, very interesting. Back of the tongue and soft palate. NG together, you heard in the video, is its own phoneme, ng. It's kind of a harsh sounding, very glottal sound, ng. And that's considered one phoneme in our language. And then back of the tongue and throat, in the open H sound. The nasal cavity sounds include and that ng, which is also one of our vocal tract sounds. And why do you think it belongs in the vocal tract sounds and our nasal cavity sounds? And that's because it's a combination sound. And is the nasal cavity portion of it, and g is the vocal tract sound portion of it. And together it makes a whole new phoneme, ng. A fun fact about your nasal cavity sounds, you cannot make them if your nose is plugged. So if you've got a student you're working with a stuffy nose, they will be unable to make these nasal cavity sounds for you, particularly if you are assessing them. The vocal cord sounds deal with the vibrations in our mouth. Some of these are voiced, some are unvoiced. For example, notice the difference between the sound that B makes and the sound that P makes, B and actually the exact same movement with your lips and your teeth and your tongue, b and p, but one is voiced and one is not voiced. And we have lots of sounds like that in our English language. And when you're teaching these to students, it's best to separate them. Your inclination might be to teach B and P at the same time. That can be quite confusing to students who are emerging in these understandings and the abilities to control all these muscles in their mouths. So you want to separate B and P when you're teaching them. We also have approximate sounds, and these are created by constricting your vocal tract slightly, but still allowing turbulent air to pass through. So we've got oh, and that one's a funny one. You're pressing your tongue up against the back of your teeth. We've got where your tongue is kind of bunched up high on the sides. We've got the W sound, and then Y, which is the Y. And all of these are require very intricate placement of your tongue, your palate, your lips, and can be really tricky to pronounce. So there, you can go as deeply as you'd like into the formation of your mouth and your face as you're making these sounds. That's moving a little bit into the realm of speech and language pathology. But a good practice, if you've got a student who is learning, as you'll see this young girl is to give them a mirror and have them look at their face, look at their mouth as they're producing sounds, and try to replicate what they see you doing as the teacher. So the question here is, which phonemes is this child still learning to produce?
Did you do anything in the bathroom? Nothing?
I was putting some lipstick on, and then I was giving my phone.
So what'd you put on?
Lipstick on.
Oh, whose was that?
It was my lipstick.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Did you ask anybody if you could put it on?
I asked myself.
Did you see how it looked?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Well, how do you, if you could describe it, how would you describe it?
Like
What?
like a noonie was. Like a noonie has big lips, big and nice moms, and she pretended it hers.
So whose lipstick is that?
Mine.
You bought it?
Yeah.
Where'd you buy it at?
My lipstick.
Yeah.
I buy it from Home Depot.
She bought it at Home Depot. I love it so much. I love it so much. So what phonemes is she still learning to produce? The predominant ones we hear in this video, she's pronouncing lipstick as yippic. So we hear that ul sound is coming out as a y sound. Stick, she doesn't yet have that st blend in her sounds. Very adorable. So often children will have these adorable pronunciations of phonemes that they're still learning to control in their mouths. And it's something that teachers should certainly address, they should teach, but not something, is particularly at her age, that you need to be really harping on and fixing. This is not something that is in need of being fixed. It will developmentally, they will grow out of it as they learn to produce phonemes correctly. So this is a chart that can be helpful when you're teaching the vowels. We only have 5 of them, but we have 15 different vowel pronunciations. And charts like this can be helpful to hang in your classroom or to have, tucked inside of your teaching folder so that you can remind yourself of our long vowel pronunciation. Long vowels always say their name, so A, E, I, O, U. And then short vowels. And short vowels are kind of the opposite of long vowels. So A says a, E says I says I, O says ah, and U says And those can be really, really tricky if you're learning English as a new language. U. They sound so similar and your mouth moves so little as you're pronouncing them. And then we have that whole category of other. This includes digraphs and vowels that have combination sounds, like the other U in put is a different vowel sound, and then oo, aw, oi, and ow. So the previous slides showed you all the phonemes in American English, but remember that there are lots of exceptions and oddballs that make phonemic awareness difficult for your students who are at risk, for your English language learners, or students who are learning English as a new language. Those are controlled vowels that you heard. You see the chart on the right. She went over them in the video. Vowel sounds like R, or, we have 3 different spelling patterns for the sound. That can be very confusing to someone who is learning English as a new language. We also have things like we call lazy letters, like the T you hear in Toronto. Most people don't say it like I just did. They say Toronto. Or in this area, if you're from Winton Village or if you're from Brighton, we don't say that T sound. It actually can sort of sound like a D sound, Brighton. That can be tricky. We also have different sounds of the same consonant depending on the placement of the consonant in the word, like the S that you hear in hats and the S you hear in gloves. So if you have someone emerging as a reader and a writer and you see them put a Z at the end of the word gloves, you can understand that it's because it's got that Z sound like they'll hear for the phoneme for Z. And then combine phonemes like you heard in the video, qu and x. So let's do a little practice. How many phonemes are in each word? So you're going to count up all of the different phonemes. So in the word cat, we've got k, a, t. Notice I didn't put any schwa sounds. So cat will have 3 phonemes. In the word phone, so PH, you might be tempted to say there's 2 there, but remember, phonemes are sounds, not letters. So when you're listening to the word phone, close your eyes, listen to the word phone. Phone. O, N. There's actually only 3. Train, T, A, N. We've got a combination vowel there in AI. So you should have gotten 4. Notice that it's not as one phoneme. It's T, A, N. Sometimes you might hear people put a ch sound at the start of that. Ch, A, N. Have you ever heard anyone say train, train? But it would still have 4 phonemes because you still got to squeeze that R sound out of there. Stronger. You try that one. That's a hard one. St, is one sound. Is one sound. You should have 6 on that one. And then quickly, qu, e, k, u, e. You should have 5 on that one. If that was difficult for you, you should go back and practice. Watch that video, listen to those phonemes again, and do some practice words for yourself. Find some really tricky words or look around you and see what words you see and try to count out those phonemes. We'll do a little bit more work with this in class this week. So once you have mastered all of the sounds, the 44 phoneme sounds in the English language, you can start to play with them and you can start to build what's called your phonemic awareness. And this is not just being able to hear and distinguish and pronounce the sounds, but being able to move up all the way up this foundation, this building block for phonemic awareness. So it starts with that kinesthetic awareness of sound. When you're saying, what is your mouth doing? That's that basic understanding, what's happening with your lips, what's happening with your mouth. Then you can start to blend 2 words into a compound word with an auditory prompt. So if I say rain and bow, put them together, you get rainbow. And sometimes teachers will use hand signals like that. Blending 1-syllable words from an auditory prompt. So if I give you g, what's the word? You should be able to say bug. Number 4, recognizing and distinguishing between similar sounds, noticing the similarities between the TH you hear in thin and the TH you hear in then, thinking about your mouth, thinking about what you hear and how they're similar and different. And then finally, we have segmenting, which is one of our key skills that young readers have to master. So segmenting works like this. I give you the word cat, and you have to tell me the sounds you hear. K, a, t. And that is how you segment cat. Isolating initial sound sounds like this. If I give you the word build, tell me what sound you hear first. A student should be able to say for that B sound. Then changing that initial sound is just a little bit more tricky. So if I say cat and I want you to change the first sound to v, what's the new word? That. And then change that first sound to what's the word? Hat. Change the first sound to p and you get pat, and so on and so on. That's chaining. You can use chaining to help them change that initial sound. You can change the final sound. That comes a little bit later. Isolating first the final sound. That's number 8. So if I give you the word block, you can tell me the final sound is k. And then here's that chaining to the end sound. If I give you met and I want you to change the last sound to a s, what's the new word? Mess, and then men. Number 10, isolating the medial vowel sound. This is very tricky because often children are very good at finding that first sound because it's the first thing out of their mouth and the last sound because it's the last thing out of their mouth. But that middle sound sometimes gets a little lost, especially because it's a vowel sound. You'll see a lot of students in this class end up working with children on medial vowel sounds. So this is, I give you the word nest. Tell me what sound you hear in the middle, and the student has to isolate that sound. That is a really tricky skill. Next is blending 2-syllable words. So blend the sounds For the word basket, give them each individual sound and they can give you the word basket. And then finally, number 12 is rhyming. So rhyming one syllable words. Listen to the words. Do they sound the same? Cart, part, do they rhyme? Yes. A student who has full phonemic awareness can tell you that yes, those words rhyme. So this is not every skill in phonemic awareness, but these are 12 as they progress up through the skills that you'll commonly see in the kindergarten, first grade range. The two key skills that are found to be the most important when you're teaching children to read, that foundational level of knowledge, are segmenting and blending. So breaking those spoken words down into their phonemes. I give you cat, you can say k, at, and this is an Alconin box over here. So this would be, I give you the word run and you can go and for each phoneme, you can move the clay up. And then conversely, I put all the pieces in the boxes, and blending would be blending them back together. So I give you and you can blend across to the right. So that would sweep across and you can blend the word and get the word run. Those are the two most important skills that readers need to learn and need to master. When you're teaching phonemic awareness, moving into sort of the back end of our textbook, there are all kinds of really good strategies for teaching phonemic and phonological awareness to children. But generally, you want to require answers in unison to increase the participation. You can't individually teach this usually, so you need full engagement, keep a lively and fast pace, increase your support using that I do it, we do it together, you do it, providing immediate corrective feedback, give ongoing reviews, circle back and review things every single day while you're standing in line waiting for everybody to line up for music. You're going over, I'm going to give you the word cat who can tell me all the sounds, and you're going over it all the time. It's part of your daily practice in your classroom. Don't move on until your students are ready. All of them, no matter how many extra days it takes. If they haven't mastered a sound, don't move on to the next one. Increase the motivation, recognize those increases and celebrate them. Wow, you learned so many cool sounds. Look at how many sounds we all know. Teach in an animated way, use praise and reward their hard work, because learning phonemes is hard. And just to confuse you a little bit more, I'm going to show you this video. This is Dr. Louisa Moats. She is a seminal thinker in the field of literacy, and she's going to talk a little bit about the difference between letters and phonemes. Have a listen.
Most people, even a lot of teachers we've worked with, as you know, will confuse the idea of a letter with the idea of a sound, because we have a problem in English. We have 26 letters and 40 to 44 speech sounds to spell those. So of course you have to use letter combinations to spell some of them. And then we have several spellings for some sounds and several sounds for some spellings. So, you know, if we count the number of sounds in shoe, there are two, sh and oo, even though they're 4 letters. Many adults, if I ask them to tell me the number of sounds in the word 6, will tell me that there are 3. They'll go s, I, x. But the way I count those sounds is s, I, k, s. And the way I would prove that is that sick has 3 sounds, s, I, k. And if you add a s onto the end of sick, you get 6. But it's confusing because we use 3 letters for 4 sounds. That's a revelation to a lot of people, but it's the most critical underlying skill that will help the children learn to read and spell.
So some kind of mind-blowing thoughts there on letters versus phonemes. We often have very confusing combinations of sounds, letters that will represent more phonemes and vice versa than what you see on the page. So all of this can be very tricky and very confusing. To further complicate things, I want to always be thinking about our DEI notes. And here, a reminder that children learning English as a new language might have some difficulty distinguishing between some phonemes in English, especially ones that are very similar or ones that are not at all used in their native language. So for example, we talked a little bit about this, but that difference between the short vowels, I and I, so similar. You have to have a really fine-tuned ear in order to catch the differences. Same thing for consonants L and R, or O and O. If you speak Asiatic language, Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Japanese, those sounds can be almost impossible for you to produce because you don't have an equivalent sound necessarily in your language. And to just dig into this a little bit further, I found this really interesting.
You got a new friend there, bud.
On Vox.
He's loving you.
Oh, new dog. What's his name?
So.
There's a saying in Hong Kong kung fu movies. It means only speed is unbreakable. That's in Cantonese, a language with tones, which English speakers have trouble distinguishing. So when an American says that phrase with the wrong tones, you get a Cantonese meme.
It became kind of a joke that people will send to each other. It's like, oh, this badass Wi-Fi is so good. Wi-Fi, it's quite funny.
If English is your first language, though, you might be more familiar with a different joke.
Supplies!
That's the notion that East Asians mix up their R's and L's in English.
Hello, please.
It's a running gag in Lost in Translation, an Oscar-winning film about two Americans who are sad in Japan.
Rat pack, you know Rat pack? Rat pack?
Rat pack.
The movie makes communication with the locals seem hopeless.
Lick my stocking.
Hey, lick them.
And at one point, Scarlett Johansson's character asks,
why do they switch the R's and the L's here?
For yucks.
This movie might be a bit rude, but it's not a terrible question to ask, because if you're genuinely curious, a foreign accent gives us a chance to learn something about another language. So this trope has been applied to Japanese, Korean, and Chinese speakers. But all of these languages deal with R's and L's in different ways. First, though, we need to talk about the R sound in English. It turns out there isn't just one way to pronounce it.
Oh, it's incredibly varied.
Eleanor Lawson uses ultrasound to study English phonetics.
Have chilled R's, which are a sort of a R sound. You can probably hear my tapped R, so I do a R sound. Varied. You can have a retroflex R, where your tongue essentially curls upside down under your palatal arch. Run.
One.
She says the bunched R, which is common in North American English, is particularly complex.
Nurse.
Say the word fur. How would you tell someone where to put their tongue to make that R? The middle of the tongue rises up in the mouth while the root of the tongue is pulling backwards, and you might have some lip rounding as well. R sounds like this, where the airflow isn't blocked by the tongue or the lips, are called approximates in phonetics.
So forming all of these strictures at the same time could be very difficult for someone who's not used to producing that.
The R sound is one of the last consonants that English-speaking kids learn to say. It takes up to 5 adorable years for them to figure it out.
Poo-poo and red.
And the L sound in English can change depending on its position in a word. Say the word ladle or level. That first L is a clear L. You can probably feel your tongue touching the top of your mouth right behind your teeth, as in lead. But the L at the end of the word is a dark L, where the tip of the tongue might not even touch the top of your mouth at all.
A dark L is where the back of the tongue is moving up towards the soft palate, and it gives it a sort of O-ish sound, so like an O.
Level. So the English R and L are complicated, but still,
Rat pack.
they seem like pretty different sounds. It might help to look at Spanish. Say the word salero.
Salero, salt shaker, salero.
This R is made with a flap of the tongue on the ridge behind the front teeth. That's not too far away from where the L is pronounced.
Salero, hora, varios, oruga, pare.
Japanese has that R sound. It doesn't have the L in lake or the R in red.
we have rariruredo, which sounds kind of similar to both L and R.
Those are the 5 syllables in Japanese that contain the tongue flap sound.
Rariruredo.
Try saying them.
라리루레로.
When they're converted into the Latin alphabet, they're spelled like this, with the letter R. But the Japanese R sound
La.
is actually closer to our L sound, la, than it is to the English ra.
My name is Mariko, and for all of my English-speaking friends, their intuition to say is Mariko. And then how I explain to them is just imagine my name spelled with Maliko, and then you should be fine.
When words migrate from English to Japanese, both R's and L's become Japanese R's.
ガラス、カレンダー、ボーリング、ライト。
There are thousands of these loan words that Japanese speakers have to relearn with ers and uls, which are 2 sounds that Japanese ears weren't tuned to distinguish in the first place. Like Japanese, Korean doesn't have the English sound. They have this letter.
It's lier,
Lear,
lier,
leer, lil.
Like my tongue is going straight up to the roof of my mouth. Lier.
It takes on a different sound depending on its position within the word. So when it's followed by a vowel, it has the flap sound like a Japanese R.
둘이서, 둘이서.
That also means it's written with the letter R when converted into Latin script.
둘이서.
But when it's at the end of a word,
제발.
or is followed by a consonant,
들리다.
it sounds more like an L sound, and it's transcribed in the Latin alphabet as L. So it's pretty unlikely that Korean speakers would say hero, since their L sound can map on to the English L. But the dark L doesn't exist in Korean. So when they're new to English, Koreans might use their own L sound in spots where we would use a dark L, near the ends of words.
As the story unfolds, someone may change the word.
There are at least 8 major Chinese languages, but we'll look at Mandarin and Cantonese. They both have a clear L sound, and it's restricted to the beginning of syllables.
Lang is like pretty.
La, drag.
So the notion that they would switch fa la la into fa ra ra, it's just wrong, and the makers of A Christmas Story should feel bad. Like Korean, Mandarin and Cantonese don't have the dark L sound, as in pull. But when they come across an L near the end of a word in English, they tend to pronounce it more like a vowel.
Wow. 100 years old, 90 years old, I said, we should respect this kind of people.
You chose the coldest possible, really.
Mandarin does have an R sound. At the beginning of a syllable, it sounds like this.
So actually maybe the R is sounds more like the S in treasure. 任性.
And at the end of a syllable,
it means sun.
Cantonese, on the other hand, doesn't have an R sound at all. So when speaking English, they sometimes use a W sound or an L sound.
We just tried very hard to prove ourselves.
Our ability to produce sounds in a new language depends in part on whether those sounds are meaningfully distinct in our first language. So a Japanese speaker hearing ul and it's a lot like an English speaker hearing tones in Chinese.
Lang, 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 lang.
Ma, 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 ma. Yeah, so I know people's mind just blown away.
We all carry the rules of our native language with us when we learn new languages.
Accent is your identity. So I don't want to sound like an American person or British person.
So if you hear a foreign accent, remember that it's a unique hybrid. It's like a lion with stripes, something you can only get if you're brave enough to venture beyond the comfort of your mother tongue. If you enjoyed this video, you're probably...
So I really like that last little reminder, and I think it ties nicely back to what I was hoping you would get here. I really enjoyed that video. I'm fascinated by phonetics and the way that languages play with sounds and how we all have a different set of sounds in our languages. But a reminder, if you've got someone who is learning English, particularly as a child, some of these things come into play. The way that their native language sounds can affect the way that they can distinguish and learn new sounds to them, especially if they're whole new sounds to them in the English language. So keep that in mind as you're assessing, as you're planning, and as you're moving through the semester with your focus student. Okay, that is all I've got for you on phonological and phonemic awareness. And you're now going to move into the rest of this half of the module and then come back again for alphabetic principle and phonics.